Hi guys, and welcome to the video. In this video we are going to look at a game by Bobby Fischer. This game is a somewhat legendary game, played in 1970. Say hi to Bobby, he's thinking over there. It was played in 1970 against Ulf Andersson, an exhibition game. And Bobby, in this game, unleashed a very potent and interesting plan in the hedgehog. Now, well, a word of warning, this might be a longer video, so if your attention span is short, you can find shorter videos on my channel or on other channels. In this one, you will actually learn some chess, so if you're in that mindset, in that state of mind, stay tuned. So, this game, a very important plan. But before we look at the game by Bobby, we're going to put it in historical context and look at some previous examples, and also see why I thought back to this plan, because this plan was and is alive and kicking, as demonstrated in the recent game. So Fischer Andersson was played in 1970. In 1966, Bobby had the black pieces, and we're going to need to flip the board around because he was black. This was played at, I believe, an Olympiad or like preliminary round or something, 1966, against Julio Garcia Sorucho. So Bobby had black, and it was a Sicilian. And this is one of the reasons why this plan and the hedgehog in general is important, because it can arise in many positions with both colors from various openings. So let's have a look. This one was from a Sicilian. Bobby had black. So let's have a look. E4, C5, Sicilian. And we start off as a dragon variation, knight C3, A6. And we have the Sosen. Sometimes referred to as the Fischer Sosen, because Fischer liked this with white. But okay, Julio Garcia played this with white against him. E6, bishop B3, B5. Let's lower the volume actually of the moves. So B5 by Bobby. Quickly going to go over the moves. A3, stopping B4, giving a square to the bishop as well. Bishop B7, castles. So this is a Sicilian, and not a pure hedgehog in a way, because the hedgehog would be this pawn back here on B6. That's kind of the pure hedgehog because the pawns align on the 6th rank, and it's called the hedgehog because the pawns kind of, they present, this spike, or you can't get too close to the hedgehog or you will get stunned. So that's kind of, where the name comes from. But okay, this pawn is on B5, which makes it slightly different. But Bobby, nonetheless, unleashed this plan for the first time. So knight E5. Usually this knight is very good if you can place it here. White really can't play F4 because he will lose the bishop pair after knight C4. You play queen F2, queen C7. Still you can play this because knight G4, rook C1, king H8. A very cryptic move, unless it's followed up with a very specific plan, which is what Bobby did. So after knight C2 E2, Bobby played rook G8, and now we see the plan. He wants to play G5 and sort of, bring the power of his pieces. Sort of unleash the power of the pieces. The pawn on G5 wants to go to G4, undermine the E4 pawn, and then you want to unleash this bishop, you want to unleash this knight, you want to use the G file. So sort of all the pieces get into the game. King H1, G5. So white didn't want to allow this push, and he played H3, but now rook G6. Knight C3, and Bobby double the rooks. Now, fortunately, in this game, we kind of didn't see the full power of the plan, because white kind of made a bad move here. He sacrificed on E6, and this turned out horribly because Bobby just took an E4, won a pawn, and took an E6. So we're actually up a piece for just a pawn. And according to my sources, the game actually ended here, so it wasn't very interesting. Now, like most chess masters, Bobby, he studied, his predecessors, and one of them was, of course, the late great Paul Morphy. And we're going to look at a game that he played with the black pieces. Now, completely different opening. And we're just going to look, quickly at the opening. Knight c3, bishop c5, d4. White took it. Black took it. There's pressure here, so bishop d7. White took it c6. Pawn takes. Bishop goes to a4. Queen f6. Castles. Knight e7. And here, a poor move by white, and kind of a little bit of a knock on some of the games by the old masters, because their opponents didn't play particularly well at times. And here bishop e3 is positionally very suspect. Okay, it's just a horrible move, because we're going to take, we're going to leave double pawns, and Morphy immediately attacked it with queen h6. White defended, and now the reason why this is so horrible is because we've completely given up control of this e5 square. So knight g6, which will gain the e5 square. So knight e5, castles, and here after h3, Morphy, perhaps for the first time in chess history, unleashed this plan with king h8 and rook g8. So king h8, knight d1, trying to maneuver the knight, but now we're starting to attack rook g8. Different position. It's not a hedgehog position, but maybe this is one of the first times we see this king h8, rook g8, g5 stuff in action. And it worked out very well for Morphy in this game. He played g4. His opponent took. It's Louis Paulsen, actually, who was attributed to the Paulsen Sicilian. So he's no slouch, but I didn't like bishop e3, I'm not going to lie. So a3 takes, bishop takes. He could have taken with the rook, but the pressure on the g file is simply too much. Bishop e6, cheeky move, and after the greedy queen takes e7, the game ended because Morphy announced mate in 5, which is actually correct, because you're going to take on g2, and he's going to mate in 5. And it's I'm going to leave it up to you to verify if you want. He's going to check here. The queen's going to come in. We have the bishop. Too many pieces around the king. It's going to be mate. So Bobby had kind of played this idea once before without much resistance, and I'm pondering if maybe he knew the idea from this previous Morphy game. Who knows? But let's have a look at this somewhat legendary game that Bobby played against Ulf Andersson. At the time, Ulf was at his peak, I think number 3 in the world. A fantastic player, super instructive, in his positional style. But at the time of this game, he was perhaps, certainly not at his peak. A young player, but not, at his best. But that's not taking anything away from Bobby in this game. So Bobby opened with b3. Very surprising, something he didn't do a lot or even at all. But it seems like he had a clear plan in this game, and the plan was to play a reverse hedgehog. So bishop e2, the pawn is protected, c4. Knight f6, e3, and it seems like white is waiting for black to play d5 when we have a reverse Sicilian. And as we've seen in some of these hedgehog games, well, the one that we looked at with Bobby being black, in the Sicilian you sometimes get these, hedgehog type positions. So the game goes on, bishop e7, pieces out, nothing out of the ordinary, a3, and white is simply setting up a hedgehog position here with d3, anticipating at some point black on d5. So developing moves, and then finally black goes d5. A logical move. Bobby takes, and knight takes. And now we have the hedgehog. We have these pawns here. And this typical hedgehog development. Knight b to d2 and castles. And that's what happens on the next two moves. Knight b to d2, f6, castles, bishop e6. And of course black is very solid. It's a Sicilian with colors reversed. So, black's not doing badly here. But here Bobby goes for this plan, which I'm sure that Andersson didn't know about. And in fact, later in his career, Ulf Andersson became one of the leading exponents of the hedgehog for black. So I'm guessing he was, impressed with this game and, you know, got fascinated with the hedgehog. So king h1 by Bobby, setting up this plan of rook g1 and g4. Ulf plays queen d7, you know, central development, rook g1 and rook a to d8. So black kind of, you know, finished his normal development, and white plays knight e4. Much like Bobby did in the other game with colors reversed, he played knight e5. And once again, you can't play this because knight g5. And maybe black could have played differently here, but he went queen f7, which kind of plays into what white wants to do, because now he plays g4. And that's what he wanted. Note that black kind of needs to keep this pawn structure intact as much as he can. You know, if you play f5 here, you know, challenging, there's obviously knight g5, the e5 pawn is hanging, things become too weak. So we kind of have to keep our focus. But Ulf went for g6, which again weakens this pawn chain, because now we move the base up one. So now if you attack the base, we're gonna, you know, give a weakness to the front of the pawn chain. So rook g3, exactly like in the other game against Garcia. Bishop d7, rook a to g1, knight b6. Now this unleashes the battery of the queen and the bishop on b3, but Bobby simply defends. Bishop c8. Otherwise we just take the bishop pair, so bishop c8 looks reasonably forced. Knight h4. And now white is trying to unleash the potential, the dynamic potential of the rooks on the g file. Knight e4. It doesn't want to trade because white still has a small, you know, ambitions of a space advantage of you know, on the king side, so he doesn't want to trade pieces. And here he plays knight f5. And this can't be taken for the simple reason that we unleash the power of the rooks on the g file, and you can't protect the bishop on g7. So we win back material. And we can actually have a look at the one variation. If takes, bishop takes, you can say, okay, I want a piece. You're going to win the piece back here. And if you take here, I take with the king. And I have two rooks for the queen, but I will flick in this move. And you will feel the pain. If you go to h8, well, actually it doesn't really matter. In both cases I take the queen, you have to take the rook, and I take this with check. So this is beneficial to white. So for that reason, black didn't take the knight. He played bishop to e6. Again hitting this pawn, but again Bobby just protects with knight c5. Knight e7. But now the base has sort of fallen and Bobby starts to cash in. He takes on g7. And after g5 we have unleashed the full potential of, well, I didn't want to flip the board, but has unleashed the full potential of, you know, this diagonal here. And this bishop has no counterpart, it's too strong. So g5 breaks the pawn chain. Ulf tries to get some counterplay, but pawn takes f6, and the fact that black has to leave this pawn, you know, as it is, shows that things have gone horribly wrong. White now has the bishop here. He's temporarily up a pawn, and this pawn is super weak. d4, pawn takes, and bishop c4. Wants to win the exchange. So black flexing d3, and white takes. Up a pawn and the bishop here, threatening to come back. Super strong bishop. Too many things have gone wrong for black. So he sacks the exchange, but it's simply too much. And Bobby plays bishop e5. Here he could have concluded the game in very nice fashion by unleashing a combination. Good moment for you to pause the video and find the win for Bobby. What's the most clinical win here? It is in fact, assuming you paused and came back, take on f5. It's a very nice win. Rook here. We want to unleash the potential of this bishop here. So a move like queen f8 is met with queen takes e6. And then f7. And the full potential has been unleashed. If we take this, we're going to get mated. And I would personally promote to a rook. and kill the mate. So this is what Bobby could have done. He played bishop e5 and eventually won the game. A few more moves. Let's just have a look. h4. I mean, he's up the exchange and he still has the attack, so rook h3, king g8, takes, f4. He could have won quicker, but a very convincing win nonetheless. Now, I said alive and kicking, so I will show you a recent game. But before that, I will show you a game from a completely different opening. And this is a game that left a big impression on me as well. And I employed this plan with black myself. And this was in one of my favorite chess books, and it's called Secrets of Modern Chess Strategy by John Watson. A book published around the millennium, I believe. And here, black sets up the pure hedgehog with, b6, e6. And the moves are fairly standard for both sides. Queen d2, castles, rook fd1, rook c8, rook ac1, queen c7. So this has been seen many times. Bishop f1, rook f2, e8. A key move starting the plan of transferring the bishop from d8 to c7. Strong plan. And now black is sort of threatening to unleash the power of this battery with d5. So white plays queen g1 to protect the pawn. And now we start the plan, the Bobby plan. King to h8. White play rook c2, rook g8, rook d2, and g5 by Yusupov. Bishop d4, rook g6. White wants to reroute the knight, and he does. But black, keeps on adding fuel to the fire. Now we can triple. There's some, easy attacking ideas. And the bishops are kind of, waiting for things to materialize. Rook e1, g4. And in this position, Taimanov took on g4, which kind of seems to, play into black's hands. But on the other hand, if you play f4, maybe e5, and things are breaking open for black. He took on g4, e5 anyway, and then knight takes g4. Now e3 will be captured, and you lose the dark squared bishop. And in the end, Yusupov won a nice game. We can have a look. He took an f2, took an e4, and won a pawn. And white doesn't really have much counterplay. The bishop just stays on the long diagonal, and you see like all the pieces combined for this heavy pressure. And black is already up a pawn, so should be an easy win. Let's see how Yusupov finished it. Okay, he gave up a pawn, but knight f4. And now he's starting to unleash everything. Queen h6, starting to take this guy. Queen h4. And this was double on the h file. And now there's trouble on h2. He sacrificed the exchange, but nothing to be done. Everything is covered here. No worries for black. And a nice final touch. Rook takes d2, and it's game over. Bishop takes, queen takes. And you're going to get mated, let's say here, and rook h1. Fantastic game by Yusupov. So I played this plan, some of my friends, GM friends that I studied with in the past, they employed this plan with good results. And just the other day, to my surprise, while doing commentary on the Icelandic Championship, I saw this plan in action yet again in the game between Steingrímsson with white and Guðmundur Kjartansson with black. This time it was a Sicilian. e6, d4, takes, knight c6, knight b5. And here, white went for c4. I mean, he has other ideas, but c4 kind of, sets up this. You want to set up this Maroczy bind kind of structure, but black can set up a hedgehog, and that's what he did. He played bishop e7, bishop e2, castles, and b6. And compared to a normal hedgehog, this guy is kind of out of play. Bishop b7, rook c1, rook c8. And we have this typical structure, right? In general, do we want to play f4? Here it's a little bit tricky because there's also pressure on e4. So white preferred to keep e4 under, on the wrap with f3, queen c7, queen f2, and bishop d8. So we see kind of the plan from especially the Yusupov game with bishop here, queen b8, starting to materialize, and very similar to the Bobby game. Knight goes back to d7, so that this pawn is protected, and after rook d1 we can play queen b8 and set up for this bishop c7 idea. Okay, queen g1 again. He wants to protect this, but now Gummi went for king h8. And when doing the commentary, I got so excited. Ah, he's doing the Bobby plan. He's going for the Bobby plan. And indeed he did. Bishop d4. He played g5, rook d2, and rook d6. Now he did surprise me here after rook e1. I thought, kind of the pure plan is to go here, h5, g4, or g4 immediately. But he didn't like the pin on the f6 knight, and he went king g8. I think he wanted to play h5 after white had played h3. So at the b4 he played rook h6. And I think white kind of lost some time with knight b5, knight a3, knight c2. So compared to normal hedgehogs, he's way behind. So maybe black can take some concessions in giving up time, as he did in this game. h3, and now he went back, rook g6, knight a4, and g4, blowing things open. Now we can't take with the h pawn because of check, and take with the f pawn, this drops. So a little bit of a hairy situation. Here I thought he would go for knight h5. Well, he did actually. Yeah, he played knight h5, rook g2, knight g3, king g1. And here black sort of has everything he wants. In the game he went for knight takes f1, bishop c6, and it ended up in a long endgame which black eventually won in 83 moves. But he could have made life a lot more easier for himself if he had played d5. And this sort of unleashes the full power of black's pieces. Now you introduce this battery into the game. You already have this dynamic knight on g3. And it's a strong knight because white would love to try to close things up with e5, but if it does, at any point, you play knight f5. Then you take this, and you grab this, and things blow up in white's face. So this is actually, after d5, a very difficult position for white. Computer gives a huge edge to black. And this would have been sort of, the full culmination of the Fischer plan. But it did work in this game, and he won the game. So the Fischer plan is alive and kicking. For full disclosure, I will show you kind of a model game for white against this plan. And it's a plan employed in a game between Kasparov and Kramnik. A plan I employed with white as well. So, it pays to be universal, to, know the ideas from the white side, from the black side. And I once managed to use this in a game against the Grandmaster here in Iceland. And I got a very strong position. And I believe the game was drawn. I might have won. I think it was a draw though. But I got a very strong position, time advantage, etc. And I put my opponent in great trouble. So, Kasparov Kramnik, it was a Sicilian. Okay, pressed the wrong button there. Doesn't really matter. Okay, Sicilian, a6, and Kasparov goes on c4. Knight f6, knight c3, and queen c7. And now Kasparov plays a3. He doesn't want to face any kind of pin here on b4. d6. And we get these standard kind of moves here. f3, bishop e7, black sets up with the hedgehog, and king h1. And black goes for this plan we've seen in some of the games we've been looking at, with bishop to d8, intending bishop to c7. Rook c2, rook e8, and now bishop c7. And now Kasparov, completely aware of course what's going on, doesn't want to allow d5 hitting h2. So he goes bishop to g1, pulling his bishop back, but defending very importantly and keeping this pawn structure, this pawn chain well intact. Well, this kind of, clamps down on the ideas that black is trying to play for. And you see kind of the model setup for white here. Brings the rook to b1, queen to c1. He reroutes the knight to d3. And then plays a4. So up to this point, Kasparov is playing almost a perfect game. After queen c8, he played the wrong move. He played b5. But in his annotations after the game, and as confirmed by modern engines, he should have played a5 here. He played b5. The game ended in a draw. But a5 is super strong. I mean, white pieces are optimally placed for a breakthrough on the queen side. We got all the heavy pieces. We got the knights nicely posted. The bishop's kind of luring, in the back. But having the influence after a5, the key point is we're kind of trying just to play a takes b6 and then c5, breaking through. And once we break through, the pressure just becomes unbearable. And meanwhile, we're keeping everything under lock and key here. The pawn chain is keeping everything under control. So, in fact, black's best move is to take, but then there comes b5. And white has an overwhelming position, as is easy to verify with any engine. If we take, it's just horrible. So, what does black really do? So this is kind of a model plan for white, indeed. But, as you saw in the Steingrimsson-Kjartansson game, under the right circumstances, the Bobby Fischer plan is alive and kicking. You can play with both colors. You can get the heads up with white in many setups. You can get out of the English, out of b3. You can start with knight f3. You can get out of some d4 openings, Sicilian. So with both colors, be a universal chess player. So to be that, you need to have this knowledge about these positions. That's the way it is. So thank you, Bobby. See you next time. Bye-bye.